What is up, YouTube? That's here. Today I'm back playing more Pokemon VGC content made exclusively for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, and today we are going to be doing another team building guide, and this time we're going to be taking a look at flowcharts. What are flowcharts, what do they do, and how can you use them to become a better Pokemon player in Scarlet and Violet VGC? All of that will be answered today, but before we get into it, I just want to let you guys know that if this video gets to 100 likes, I'll make another one of these videos. So if you like this stuff, you want to see more, you actually learn something, let me know in the comments so we can make more videos like this, thinking about once a week. So let me know if this is something you like. So yeah, what are flowcharts? The easiest way to describe flowcharts are they are lead options that you have predetermined to deal with specific matchups, specific metas. Every one of your teams, you should have every one of your lead options written down on paper or memorized in your head, and you should know exactly the situation in which you can lead with two respective Pokemon in your team, and also about 3 to 4 turns after that, what the game plan is to either pin other teams or get yourself out of a pin that other teams can put you in. Sometimes flowcharts can be made defensively, sometimes they can be made offensively. So I'm going to give you guys the bare bones introduction into how to start proactively thinking for yourself and start planning flowcharts for the teams that you need to use in your own games. Today's flowchart team example will be built around one of my absolute favorite Pokemon. I think I probably have the most CP in the world ever earned at official events with this thing. Don't quote me here, but I probably have about 300 CP total earned with this thing. And that is, once we go to our boxes, it's going to be Zoroark. I think I have more Zoroark CP than pretty much every other player. I've won mid-seasons, I've won Premier Challenges, I've taken it to regionals. Zoroark is one of the coolest Pokemon in the game. It gets an ability called Illusion, which means when you send it out, it disguises itself as the last Pokemon in your party. So if you utilize Zoroark, you can play some really, really cool mind games. And I think it's the perfect Pokemon for explaining how flowcharts work, because you have to flowchart to play this Pokemon. You have to plan out the first 4 to 5 turns of misdirection and tricking your opponent. And I think Zoroark's a really, really good example. It might be a little bit too advanced, but I think it's a good example to show exactly what I'm talking about. So yeah, Zoroark is a really, really good option. If you guys remember in the last team building video, we went over how important it was to team build for defensive typing, picking roles, and we described what each of those roles were. We're going to be doing a very similar thing in this video, but I would highly recommend, please go check out last week's team building video if you want the bare bones introduction to what team building is in general. I'm probably going to be going a lot faster in this video because I don't have a ton of time to record today, but it's definitely worth going back and checking out that video. There's a link to it in the description if you want more team building content. So yeah, Zoroark, what does it do? Why are we even using a Zoroark? Like I said, I talked about the illusion ability, but if we would take a look at Zoroark here, let's plug in this. This is Showdown. Let's plug Zoroark into Showdown, and you should be building your teams in-game and Showdown, and you should also have a piece of paper, which we're going to be getting to and taking some notes in a little bit. But Zoroark actually gets a bunch of really, really cool stuff. So Zoroark gets the illusion ability, like I said. So this Pokemon appears as the last Pokemon in your party until it takes direct damage. So we can use Zoroark to force our opponents to respect specific matchups, aka specific flowcharts, and then punish them with a speed tier that is not in the current Pokemon that you're using. So a good example was you disguise Zoroark as a slow Pokemon and then hit them with your fast Zoroark. They are respecting the slow Mon, they think they have speed control, they have no speed control, you punish with Zoroark. Another good thing you can do is like go Zoroark and like a middle of the pack speed Pokemon, maybe like a base 95 to 100, and they think that they just outspeed you. And in reality, like, they don't outspeed you, and because they don't because they already outspeed you, so I'm getting way ahead of myself, they won't bring their speed control because they think they already have speed control. So you can punish and get wins you wouldn't normally be able to get in those situations. So Zoroark's really, really cool. 105 base speed, 105 attack, 120 special attack, and I really am a big proprietor of just adding these mons to your team, and you just want to look at their defensive typing, you just want to look at their offensive pressure, look at their base stats. You don't need to look at moves, you don't need to look at like physical or special sweepers yet. You just add the mons one at a time and then try to add mons to help round out the team. So we have the Zoroark here. What is a really, really cool mon that you can disguise Zoroark as that no one's using? I know a lot of people are thinking like, I like disguising my Zoroark as Mimikyu. You know, if we take a look at like Mimikyu, for example, Mimikyu has really, really good defensive typing. Like, what's good versus Zoroark? Fighting attacks, bug attacks. What does Mimikyu resist? Fighting attacks and bug attacks. So this is a pretty common partner to disguise Zoroark as. What do you want to use against Zoroark? Fake outs. What do you, mock punches, things like that. What do you want to What doesn't work against Mimikyu? All of those things. So Mimikyu is a pretty standard option. We're going to be going to the next level. we're going to the next level. I think the perfect Pokemon to build flowcharts and disguise Zoroark as is Dondozo. Now, all you guys are probably clicking off the video like, oh my gosh, it's a stupid Dozo team. It's not a stupid Dozo team. We're going to show you guys something really, really cool. What do we get out of disguising Zoroark as Dozo? Now, for those guys who don't know, Dozo is usually commonly paired with a Pokemon called Tatsugiri. Now, Tatsugiri has a really cool ability called Commander. If its ally is Dondozo, this Pokemon cannot be act or hit, and it goes basically inside of the Dozo, and you get a +2 boost to all your stats. Tons of content creators have featured it. I've featured it myself. It's a really common core on the ladder right now. But when you add Zoroark to the mix, it completely changes things. If I were to lead Dondozo and Zoroark, and have Zoroark disguised as the Tatsugiri, they'd be thinking, why isn't the Tatsugiri inside the Dondozo? One of these must be Zoroark. But they don't know which one, right? And so you're starting to see situations where, same thing, I can lead Zoroark and Tatsugiri. And they're like, okay, why isn't the Tatsugiri going in the Dondozo? Which one's Zoroark? And you can create a bunch of little micro situations where you have complete control of everything on that first turn of the game. You have complete control and your opponent is just reacting to whatever you're doing. And the more aggressive they play, the more that might come back to bite them depending on how they want to play it. And so we can use the fact that we're exuding the pressure, we're the one dictating play, to wrap our opponents around our finger and build flowcharts that give us the control that we need to win the game within our first few turns. This is definitely a meme team. This is definitely aggressive, but it's going to be a lot of fun. So we have Zoroark, we have Dozo, we have Tatsugiri. Because we know that we want these Pokemon, I'm going to highly recommend you guys open up Team Builders here. So there's a link to the Team Builder in the description. We're just going to put in Zoroark. I would normally say Zoroark's like, what is it? Its defensive typing doesn't really matter that much. It has weaknesses to Fairy, weaknesses to Bug, weaknesses to Fighting, what we talked about, but Zoroark's basically a glass cannon. It's going to get killed by almost anything whenever it gets hit anyways. So just remember that. Like, Zoroark's not supposed to stick around. I would also say, if you're not having an impact with your Zoroark, the first 2 turns that it's out, you're definitely gonna struggle, because that's like Zoroark's biggest surprise factor is the first few turns that it's out. And if like you just come out and you lose a Zoroark in the first turn, you're basically gonna lose the game. I have so many videos on how to use Zoroark, Zoroark tips, Zoroark tricks. I've uploaded probably 30 or 40 different Zoroark videos on YouTube. If you type in THATSAplusONE Zoroark, so many cool little tips and tricks and tutorials will come up. This is definitely a Pokemon that I know a lot about, and I'm excited to make this team. So let's finish this up, finish up the type chart. We're gonna go Dondozo, right? Dondozo, Tatsugiri, right? And you can see our Tatsugiri here. We're gonna go the red one. I think that red one is Droopy to get the defense or spit up boost. You can see we have a double weakness of Fairy on the Tatsu and the Zoroark slot. We'll talk about why that's not that big of an issue later. Sorry, right down here. There. So you can see that we have these 3 Pokemon. We have weaknesses to Dragon, weaknesses to Bug, weakness to Fighting, weakness to Grass, weakness to Electric. So we're going to be using the rest of our mons to not stack that many more weaknesses in those departments and come up with other Pokemon that are really, really cool to surround Zoroark with and disguise and add to our flowcharts. Note that we haven't even started the flowcharts. We're just adding mons one at a time. You can also think about, if you're stuck at this part of the team building phase and you don't know what mon you should be adding or using, I would highly recommend taking a look at some usage stats. We covered in the last video how to take your own usage stats, using your own usage stats. You can also go to websites like Pikalytics and take a look at their usage stats. You can look at it for singles or doubles. A lot of these tools that I'm using here definitely also work for singles. So if you're a singles player, this stuff still applies to you. You still have to do all this work. But you can see what Pokemon are popular. Like if we click on Arcanine right here, we can see its base stats. We can see the common moves that it uses. We can also see common teammates. So if you're looking for, like, if you have a Zoroark here, you can, like, let's just go to Dondozo. Let's just find Dozo, right? We find the Dozo here. We see its base stats. We see the common moves that people like to run on Dozo. We see the common teammates people like to pair with Dozo. So if you're ever stuck not knowing like what Pokemon you can add to your team, you can come in this situation, common terrestrialized types that people like to do with their Dozo. So Pikalytics is a great resource for stuff like that if you're ever stuck midway through a team building process, just to give you a little bit of a memory jog, like, oh yeah, that Pokemon, I want one of those. So think about using stuff like that. I already have the team planned though. The next couple mons we're going to be using are going to be Indeedee Female, and Armarouge. Now, I'm sure you guys have seen the combo of Indeedee Armarouge with Dondozo Tatsugiri. It's a common rental code. I think it won first place in one of the big initial tournaments last week. our team's going to be built very, very different, and it's going to function at a speed tier that team did not. So actually, the fact that that team did well is going to help our team because people think they're comfortable with that matchup. And what we're going to be doing using Zoroark in the last Pokemon is flipping that matchup on their head and basically just rolling them over, using our flowcharts, which we'll get into in just a minute, for respecting how the matchup is normally played. But this is very, very important. The last Pokemon here, let's add these two to the list right here. Indeedee female and Armarouge. Indeedee female and Armarouge. And I still think you want to go Flash Fire on the Armarouge. Just because I think it's just one of the best abilities in the game. It just basically gives you a Trick Room option if you didn't have one. So yeah, very, very solid team so far. We have 2 weaknesses to Fairy with a Fairy Resist. We have 2 weaknesses to Dark with a Dark Resist. We have no weaknesses, sorry, we have 2 weaknesses to Bug with no resists, but like, that's fine. This last Pokemon we're going to add is going to cover up for Bug. It's going to flesh out the rest of our team. We will be adding a deliberate 3rd weakness to the Fairy department, but it's on purpose. The whole point of using Zoroark and this sort of core is lulling your opponent into a false sense of security. Any opponent that thinks that what they're doing is correct is going to become so predictable. They're going to be like, oh my gosh, this is so free. I can win by doing X, Y, and Z. And what they don't know is we're conditioning them into going X, Y, and Z so we can win, not them. We're the ones in control here. The last Pokemon that we're going to be adding here is Dragapult. This is the Pokemon that brings it all together. Dragapult. Very, very underrated Pokemon in this format. Let's go back at Dragapult. If I can spell. Dragapult right there. So you see we're adding dark weaknesses, which are intentional. We're adding fairy weaknesses, which are intentional. We're going to be able to cover up for these dark and fairy weaknesses. I want you guys to also really think about the Pokemon that use these moves. Just because we have weaknesses to dark doesn't mean that every dark thing is scary. Just because we have weaknesses to fairy doesn't mean that every fairy is scary. You can check what's actually scary by going to your usage stats and thinking, huh, well, he said fairy was scary, but like, what uses fairy attacks? I'm not afraid of like Dazzling Gleam on Goldango. Or like realistically make it rain stronger. I'm not afraid of Dazzling Gleam on even Gardevoir. I outspeed Gardevoir and can pin Gardevoir with things like Dragapult and all the other mons that I have. I'm not afraid of Dazzling Gleam. I'm not afraid of Hyper Voice on Sylveon, which for reasons we'll talk about in just a moment. So you have to think about not just the types that you're weak against, you have to think about the Pokemon that use those moves. Like, yes, we have weakness to Dark, which means Meowscarada could definitely pin us here, using, like, it's good against Dozo, it's good against Pult in situations, but, like, how do those Mons... How does Meowscarada actually work against this team? Zoroark's great against Meowscarada. Dozo can be used against Meowscarada correctly. Indeedee can redirect to Meowscarada and use its Psychic Terrain to stop Sucker Punch. Armarouge has super effective moves against Meowscarada, and Pult outspeeds Meowscarada, forces the Sucker Punch. We already talked about how Indeedee pins that. So again, we're starting to get our flow charts going. We're deliberately making ourselves weak to specific types to bait our opponent into thinking that it's okay and safe for them to bring those Pokemon so that we can then punish them. Right? So we're getting our flowcharts. We are going to now, again, we haven't even gotten into the flowcharts. I have like a whole sheet here which will actually go down and talk about the flowcharts in just a minute. So I just want to thank you guys for sticking with me so far. But the next thing we're going to be doing here, is going into the team builder, and we're going to start adding moves we know we want on each of these Pokemon. I think with Zoroark, you can go physical and you can go special. The only advantage to going physical Zoroark in this gen is it gets U-turn. And if you want to U-turn from your Tatsu and your Dozo, that's kind of cool. I don't think it's needed. I still think special Zoroark's better. Also, this team has like physical Mon. We're going to go physical here, probably like special. You need a little bit more special. Can't make Armarouge do everything. So I think we're going to go special Zoroark. And in this case scenario, I'm a big fan of Night Days. I think a lot of people like to go with Dark Pulse because Night Days can miss, but Night Days is stronger and has a 40% chance to lower their accuracy by 1. I think it's one of the best moves, and it makes Zoroark really, really good. Right now, I don't know if I talked about it. We're just adding a couple moves we know we want on each Pokemon just to flesh out their move style a little bit and see if we can make some things work. We're also going to go Protect here. You do need to have Protect on a lot of the Mons on this team just so you can correctly bait them into over-respecting Zoroark. And, you know, a lot of Mons get Protect, and if they don't get to see which Mon's Zoroark for a long period of time, it's going to really mess with their head. So that's all we know that we want right now. On the Dozo, I think that I am going to want Liquidate over the Wave Crash. I don't like the recoil coming with Wave Crash, and I don't think it's Dozo's job. Like, remember, we have Dozo Tatsu, but this isn't a Dozo Tatsu team. This is a, you better lead with the things that beat Dozo Tatsu team so I can lead with Zoroark and Pult and KO you, right? It's bait. So I don't think I really want the Wave Crash, but I also think we need the Order Up. So Liquidation and Order Up seems solid. +1 stats depending on the Tatsugiri's color. We're going to be using the red Tatsugiri, I think. It's going to be right here. I think red Tatsu boosts your special defense or defense. I know we need this one. Right, so what are we going to use on Tatsu? We know we're going to need Hydro Pump. Scald's not in the game anymore for this Pokemon, so we're going to definitely need Hydro Pump. And that's all we're going to need for now. Indeedee needs a few very, very specific moves, right? The first move you got to do is Trick Room. And everyone's like, I thought you said that you don't use Trick Room Indeedee. It's not going to be legal. It's looking like it's going to be legal. And I streamed with it the other day. It's a good Pokemon. Like, if you don't use this thing and it's an option, like, I don't know what the saying is, but, like, can't beat him, join him. Like, this create, like, we're talking about building flowcharts. This creates so many more intricacies of the flowchart and gives our team so much more depth. We're just going to use it. But we're not just going to use it to Trick Room. We're going to use it to imprison other Trick Room. We're going to be the villain here, right? Imprison Trick Room makes it so if other people are trying to Trick Room us, because they see we have Dozo, Pult, Zoroark, we just imprison their Trick Room. So against teams that are, like, Torkoal-centric, usually did Indeedee and you're absolutely fine. Psychic Terrain, which we'll be using here, protects us from Fake Out and things like that too, so it's really, really solid. The last move that we know that we want on this Indeedee, actually we can figure out the rest of these moves on Indeedee. These are all pretty standard. You definitely need to Follow Me. The redirection is the reason you use this Pokemon. Follow Me is a lot better than Rage Powder. Rage Powder, they can Terra Grass or use like safety goggles or have like Overcoat or something to avoid powder moves, like Rage Powder and Spore. Follow Me just says like, hey, you got to deal with this Indeedee first, so it's really, really important. The last move though, what do you guys think it is? I'm sure people that watch the videos regularly know what it is, but go back to the team chart. What are we weak against? Yes, we're weak to Dark, which we're going to cover up for. But weak to Fairy. Go to the type chart. What uses Fairy moves? What Pokemon uses Fairy moves? What move does it use? Oh, Hyper Voice. Oh, you mean a move that like we get on our Indeedee that we actually stab and is an AoE double hitting move? This baits the opponents into bringing Sylveon. Sylveon's a great mon. Sylveon can yawn the Dozos. Sylveon's good against Pult. Sylveon's good against Zoroark. Sylveon's great against our team. And if they bring a Sylveon, they are completely useless. Sylveon's common movesets are things like Hyper Voice, things like Shadow Balls, things like Psyshock, all three of which, if you imprison with the Indeedee, they can't really get the Indeedee off the board with Sylveon, which means they have to switch, or if they leave their Sylveon on the board and just do whatever with it, they're going to have their teammate be fighting a 1v2, which we can use to our advantage and take out wins. So it's really, really important to use Imprison on this Hyper Voice. Also, we outspeed Sylveons with this Indeedee set, so, you know, it's the type of thing to where we're going to be able to imprison them the first turn to even click the Hyper Voice. Really, really solid stuff. Up next for the Armarouge, you definitely still want the Trick Room. I think you still want the Trick Room. I don't know if I want Wide Guard, so I won't add it yet. I will add Expanding Force, though, because that's the move that you pair with Indeedee. This deals 1.5 additional damage and hits both targets, and gets a Psychic Terrain boost and a stab. It's basically like a Psychic Eruption. Very, very good move. Up here for the Pult, I think we're going to want U-Turn for sure. U-Turn is how we're going to be able to pivot and create our flowcharts if we're going to be leading like with Dozo or Zoroark, and we can pivot out and make them respect certain matchups. We're going to be pivoting into Tatsus, into Dozos, things like that. You know, we could also add Zoroark U-Turn as well, but I don't think I really want to do that. I think we definitely need the U-Turn, and I think because we're going to be going Physical Pult, we're going to want the Dragon Darts. Dragon Darts also kind of hits both. It hits twice. In doubles, it tries to hit each foe once, right? And if they protect with one or one gets KO'd, it just double taps one target. So it's actually really good. So it's kind of like AoE, but you can't Wide Guard it either. Very, very cool move. It's the signature move of Dragapult, and if we build our sets correctly, it can actually make the Dragapult work. So now that we have a better idea of the roles that these Pokemon are going to do, also, the whole thing about like picking your roles, this team is very different. It's completely hyper aggression, wins the game in like 3 or 4 turns. Picking a role is like a lead, dive buddy. Like basically we can add Zoroark as like we can talk about Zoroark as like a lead, right? And this is something we covered in like the last video, picking your roles and stuff like that. The team's built around Zoroark. Like it's the main character privilege Pokemon. Dozo is cleanup crew. Like we bring Dozo out after we've used our Zoroark, Armarouge, Dragapult shenanigans. Tatsu's definitely the role of like a dive buddy, which we talked about in the last one. We talked about in the last one is basically like a Pokemon you surround with to like pair with something that's also aggressive. Like one, they stop the one aggressive Pokemon, they don't cover up for like the second aggressive Pokemon. So it's like really, really good. We have Dive Buddy right there. And then we go, Indeedee's just redirection. Every team should have like a redirection mon in my opinion. Redirection is just super, super important. It just lets you do what your teammates want to do. Very, very important. I would say Armarouge is more speed control. Slash like Wincon number 2. Like I can force them into over-respecting Dozos and Pults and go with just a Trick Room game. If I'm a little bit, like if they want to go with like a Murkrow lead and pop Tailwinds and be super fast, I can just Trick Room. Yeah, so we're just going to go Wincon number 2 and like a speed control. There. And Pult is, well, this guy's Dive Buddy number 2. Each team, I like to go double dip the Dive Buddies. And I also am a big proprietor of when you're building your teams. When you're building your teams, you don't want to have one Pokemon do all the work. That's one of the reasons why we have like Pult and Tatsu as 2 like really, really aggressive mons, one physical, one special. You want to make it so like if this team lost its Pult and its Tatsu's wasn't aggressive, we would be up the creek without a paddle because we wouldn't have the damage needed to close out games. That way, like, if they take out our Pult or choose our Pult early, we still have Tatsu coming in with, like, a pretty respectable stat line. Like, people like to think this Pokemon's useless. This is a good stat line. 120 is really, really high for a water type that stabs, like, base 110 moves. 82 speed can definitely be used if you have correct speed control in both Trick Room or some sort of other speed control, which we'll talk about. And it's just a good mon. It's a good mon. It deals a lot of damage. Like, this thing's actually going to see play without Dozo all season. It gets Storm Drain, which we want people to think that we have. Because we have, like, we could pair, like, Tatsu and Dozo, and they're going to think, like, oh, it's Storm Drain Tatsu, they're tricking us. And then if we bring in Armarouge later, a flowchart we can actually build is them respecting that we have Storm Drain on this Dozo, or sorry, on the Tatsu, and not going for water attacks because they don't want to proc it. So a mixture of, like, Flash, Fire, Storm Drain, illusions with a little bit of Zoroark thrown in can be the magic that we need to win games before our opponent actually knows what they're doing. So now that we have a decent idea, though, about our team, we're going to start adding some items and start adding some moves. Let's talk about some other moves that we're definitely going to use on this Pokemon. I think you still add the Flamethrower. I don't know if I want Flamethrower, but I think we're going to add it for now, if I can type. There we go. Not Fling. Fling's good on this guy. We're going to add the Flamethrower. I don't know if it's necessarily like required yet. I also think that I'm a big fan of this. Like, I'm a big fan of Sash Counter. Getting them to overcommit to something and just rinsing them up. If we go take a look at these usage stats again, right? There's not that many physical mons. Like Annihilape's physical. Arcanine's Dragonite's using like E-Speeds are physical. Meowscarlet is definitely physical. King Gambit, big physical mon. T-Tar can be physical. Like, there are physical options, but the meta is mostly special attackers. Garchomp's physical, but like it's an AoE move, so it doesn't really hit us that often. Maybe I could just bait them into like using Dragon Claw, disguising myself as Dragapult, and we can build flowcharts for that. But, you know, I'm thinking that there's not that many other moves. We could put Taunt here as well and disguise ourselves as like Dozo or Tatsu, things that normally wouldn't be able to taunt and taunt things. We could also get Encore. I think Encore is a very, very underrated move in this gen. Being able to like Encore opponents' mons, you can definitely, you know, go for Protect, wait to see what move they use. You can Encore them in like the wrong moves if they go for like a status move, like a Calm Mind or something like that. It's definitely an option. And also on Zoroark, you can see that we have options for Detect or Protect. You would almost always go with Detect because you can't actually imprison Detect. I don't think there's anything that gets imprison Detect or that is commonly used. So Detect avoids imprison, but we want Zoroark to use Protect because most of these common Pokemon get Protect and not Detect. It's just a little note. Yeah, I think this is an okay set. We'll get back to it. The Dozo, I think this is going to be a Resto set. So a Rest Sleep Talk set. This is the set that I like to run when I run Dozo. So basically, we go to sleep every couple turns. We can Sleep Talk to continually get boosts from Order Up while also dealing damage with Liquidation. And this is great for closing out games, which is kind of what his name is, the Cleanup Crew. Where we're going to definitely use like leftovers here. And then as for Dive Buddy, remember, we want his role to be Dive Buddy, so we need him to function as a partner to things like Dragapult and Zoroark. We're going to use a Choice Scarf here. I think Choice Scarf Tatsu is still very, very, very good. This is a decent speed stat that can outspeed a lot of things. We take a little, like a damage calculator. So we're going to see Tatsugiri here. We're going to see what like a full speed timid Tatsugiri looks like. So a full speed Tatsugiri, we remember to set these to 50. It's 147, which is like okay normally, but then we give it a Choice Scarf. 220, which outspeeds a lot of the stuff in the game. This outspeeds Pult. we can actually even take away some of these points. Can we actually get away with Modest? No. We need to outspeed Pult too, because like that way we don't lose to other Pults. So we do need to outspeed Pult. So we do unfortunately still need to be timid, in my opinion. Yes, we do still need to be timid. I was thinking like if I could get away with Modest, but we don't have to use all these points here. So Pult is a 213. So we need 220 points in speed here with Timid Nature. And we're not even getting into the EVs yet. We just know that we need to outspeed that. And, right there. Rest of these moves, because we're going to be Scarfed, we want Muddy Water. And we're going to want Ice Beam. Sorry, not Ice Beam. Icy Wind for speed control. So we can Icy Wind and make it so things like Pult can outspeed other Pults then. Well, actually, depends on if they have Clear Body. But it makes it so like Zoroark can outspeed things. It's just important. And then the last move is going to be Draco Meteor. Right? So this is how you just one-shot other Pults. Indeedee. We already got our moves. I think the item for Indeedee can be built as Psychic Seeds. Like, I think this is pretty common. The other good items on Indeedees in these situations are things like Citrus Berries. You could go Cassie Berries for, damage mitigation if you really are afraid of that 3x Dark weakness. But in reality, most Dark attacks, most are special attacks. And the special defense boost you'd get from the Psychic Seeds 1.5 makes it so you don't die anyways. And then the Psychic Seed just works against all special attacks instead of just Dark. So that's why you want the Psychic Seeds instead. I think realistically another common item that might really, really help us in specific flowcharts is something like a Rocky Helmet for being able to redirect physical attackers. A lot of physical attackers, if we take a look at the physical attackers, things like Garchomp, we're going to be forcing them into, well, they're not going to be able to use AoE moves because we're going to have the Wide Guard on our Armarouge, right? So they're going to you're going to have to Dragon Claw, which means they're going to have to hit this. Annihilate is going to have to hit us. Things like Arcanine, Dragonite, for example, if it is a multi-scale set, hits us with a physical attack, makes contact, procs Rocky Helmet, gets KO'd. Mouse Hold hitting us and basically one-shotting itself with Population Bomb if we have Rocky Helmet. So I think that these sort of slight situations, any way to find offensive pressure off being defensive is really, really good. I think these Psychic Seeds are very, very common here. There's nothing wrong with them, but Rocky Helmet is really, really good. A lot of the physical bonds in this format, also like Meowscarada is another one, are things that are like sashed commonly. So I'm going to go with the Rocky Helmet right now. I don't know if I'm going to keep it there, but I'm definitely going to hover the Rocky Helmet. This guy, I think we are just going to add the standard set of like Wide Guard and Heat Wave. Very, very standard. I like building this guy with a Citrus Berry. It makes him just a little bit bulkier. It makes it so if you pair it with Indeedee, right? They have to go through the Indeedee if you use Follow Me, right? If you want to go for like a Trick Room Follow Me play. They have to go through the Indeedee first, which is harder to do than people think, especially if I had the Psychic Seeds. But the reason I like the Citrus Berry is because a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll go with like an AoE move first, or they'll go like double AoE moves. And in those situations, we can go like Wide Guard here and then just have the Indeedee set Trick Room. But also, they go with like 2 hits. They go with like one move that deals like, it would KO the Indeedee. Like, for example, they'd go with like a Make It Rain and another Pokemon. So what we can actually do is, in our flowcharts, right, which we haven't even gotten to yet, we've been doing this video for half an hour, we can make an Indeedee that gets OHKO'd by the Make It Rain and get ourselves Citrus Berry activated by the Make It Rain if it's like a spec set, and then we have enough health after the Citrus Berry to live through a single target attack from the Goldango's partner. And then we get up the Trick Room, and then we bring out like Dozo and just win the game, right? That's kind of the idea. Anyways, we're going to go with this set, and it's just the set that I'm comfortable with. Dragapult, we're going to be doing a Choice Band set. I'm a big fan of Choice Band Pult. I think this Pokemon's very underrated. It has the Clear Body ability, so you can't intimidate it. It has the big Dragon Darts, big U-turn. Solid mon. I don't think there's a single thing wrong with Pult other than its lackluster physical coverage, but like these two are basically what you use it for. Let's start adding a couple more moves here. We can also do this. We can sort this by physical and see what sort of physical moves Dragapult gets. I really think that you're going to still want the Phantom Force. And a lot of people go Sucker Punch here. I don't think you need the Sucker Punch. Maybe we add it a little bit later, but you're going to have Psychic Terrain on the board in almost every situation you want to use Pult. So I actually think the move that you can add here, because remember we're Choice Band, I think the best move that we can actually add here that no one really talks about is Dragon Tail. And this is a little bit of THATSAplusONE tech. It forces the target to switch to a random ally, and it goes last in the priority bracket. Now, why would you ever use this in this situation? Well, one thing that good players might notice is this team has a not so great Dozo matchup. It's okay. We basically have to counter their Dozo with Zoroark using counter, right? Dealing double damage, soaking a physical attack. That's kind of our win condition. Or we can go into a Dozo Mirror, which we definitely can win. And I think that Dragon Tail we can protect bait with our teammate like an Indeedee or a Zoroark or something else. Dragon Tail out the Dozo. When they can bring the Dozo right back in and get those stat boosts and continue to sweep, but it takes turns for them to do that, and when they come back in, they have to soak a lot of damage. Like, I can just continually Dragon Tail that slot basically forever, and if they want to keep switching in the Dozo, they're going to have to keep wasting their time, which means we can use those turns to wait out Trick Room, wait out a Tailwind, and basically forcing our opponent to have a very low impact turn at the cost of almost nothing to meet. It's taking a small advantage, and it's very niche. It also kind of helps Dragapult against other Trick Room teams or other like Roar users, because I do have a higher base speed, which means if I'm using Dragon Tail and they're using Dragon Tail or Roar, I'm gonna go first. Both of us are at minus like 6 priority. Trick Room's at minus 7 priority, so anyone that wants to Trick Room, I can do a board that like one-shots one of their Mons and then just goes right in with the Dragon Tail. Like, it's great against things like Oranguru, which Pult would not normally have a good matchup against. We'd have to be going Zoroark, and they might be having a board that can pin something like Zoroark, but you can't fake out the Pult. So like against teams that are like really specific on Oranguru getting their Trick Room up, this is a great check to make them waste their time. And the whole time they're wasting, like their teammates protecting or redirecting or doing whatever, like you're getting free damage on Oranguru, you're repositioning with your teammate, doing like potential AoE damage with things like Armarouge. You're starting to see how all these things I'm saying, you know what time it is, right? It's time for flowcharts. Right? This is flowcharting. Like, this is how it works. And now that we have our team, right, we can start taking a look at like small EV changes and small weak changes. We haven't really gotten into EVs yet. We just have our moves, we just have our items, and now we can start talking about how to actually flowchart. I'm gonna take a sip of my coffee. I've been talking for about 30 minutes without taking a single breath. If you guys like this content and you want to see more, now is your chance to leave a like, leave a comment, leave a sub. I try my best to make these things work, and I still haven't taken a sip of my coffee, so I'm doing that right now. All right. So, yeah, let's actually start getting into the flowcharts. This is the fun part. This is the fun part. Now that we have a dedicated game plan idea in our head, we can now go into, like, a pencil and paper. I would recommend doing pencil and paper. I don't really like using the notepads, so I'm probably not going to go as in-depth as I would on a pencil and paper, but what we're going to do is we're going to write down every single weed combination that we can think of and write down all of the positives and negatives for each weed combination. I will say I have a post on my Patreon where I write this all down in humongous detail. So if you guys want to see something like that, check out the Patreon. There's a link to it in the description. It's $2. You get access to all my rental teams, all my write-ups going back years and years and years. So if you ever want to see my rentals or my Poke Pace or any Patreon articles I have for learning how to get better at Pokemon, or even want to get into learning how to get coached in Pokemon, that's all on Patreon. So we're going to talk about Zoroark. And what I like to do is write down, like, what I would do is I would write down, like, Zoroark plus Dozo, right? Not equals Dozo, plus Dozo. And what I would do is I would spend a whole page of a notebook. And I have these notebooks. If anyone wants to see pictures of them sometime, you can go over them. I would spend a whole page going over every single positive thing that Zoroark and Dozo bring to the table. I'd say, man, if I disguise my Zoroark as a Tatsu, I can make them think that one of these is a Zoroark or not a Zoroark, or maybe it's Stormy and Tatsu. And I would talk about all the little intricacies that come with that and places where I can be a bully. I also talk about places that I'm, afraid. If I lead Zoroark and Dozo, I do have a weakness to Sylveon in that matchup. So that means because I have a weakness to Sylveon, I would have to be bringing Indeedee in the back to be able to protect Dozo, or pivot in that Indeedee, protect Zoroark, and then go for an Imprison. And then I'd switch back out my Dozo, switch back out the Zoroark, or, make Zoroark get KO'd by the Sylveon's teammate, then bring out Dozo, and then recontinue after that. There's a bunch of stuff like that. So you want to start thinking, like, this is also a thing where if I just tell you the answers, like Zoroark Dozo does XYZ things, here's the list. The whole point of building your flowcharts is they're your flowcharts. They're how you play the game. This is how you build your playstyle. You need to force yourself to understand the strengths and weaknesses of every single team. So let's just continue doing this. Zoroark and Tatsu. And do this for every one of your teams. You want to get like 30 to 40 different lead combinations and be comfortable playing them in a wide variety of situations. Do you ever see me play games? Every time I play games, you're like, damn, that's a lead perfectly, like almost every time. Or even if he doesn't lead perfectly, there is an exact thing that he does to regain board state very, very quickly. It's very uncommon that I just lead with something and I lose. Even and the thing you gotta remember, I'm using shit teams, so like it's a lot easier to do if you're not a professional, right? So it's all because of the work that I put in beforehand. figuring out every single matchup. And sometimes, you know, you might think like, all right, well, Zoroark-Tatsu handles this matchup really, really well. But that matchup's not in their team. But their team has like a playstyle that's kind of like the matchup that Zoroark-Tatsu works against. So what you would do is try your Zoroark-Tatsu there, see if it works. And if, you know, like, you know, tweak on the fly. But you have a loose idea of how the matchup's going to go. We're going to continue down here, Zoroark and Indeedee. Sorry, I suck at typing. And like I said, I normally write this stuff down. Zoroark-Armarouge. And I can type. I can type things, guys. All right, so I probably still misspelled it. Zoroark plus Pult. All right, so normally what you would do here is after you get down all of the mons that you want, this is all just the Zoroark matchups. You would spend a whole page talking about the good and bad things about each matchup. So what we would do here is we would space some of these out. Right, and I'm gonna go change this to like a different font size just so it shows that it's like important. That's not how that works. Whatever. This is why I like doing it in a notebook, and I don't know how to use freaking the internet, the computer. Here we go. It's fine, we'll just look at it like this. You would write down like every possible thing that you can think of that's good about this matchup. So like Zoroark-Dondozo. It makes your opponent respect that one of these is a Zoroark, but they don't know which one. You can use that to get your opponent to overcommit to specific slots. And overcommitting, I want to talk about this. If we go back to the flowchart, or not the flowcharts, if we go back to the usage stats, remember this is all based off usage stats. That's how we actually know how to create these flowcharts. We talked about physical mons, and we talked about some of our weaknesses from our type chart earlier. What's the biggest physical mon that threatens Dozo? You know the idea? It's this one. It's Masquerada. Masquerada gets Flower Trick, Auto Crit, Grass Move. It's great. Right? It's pretty good. Masquerada's good against it's good against Indeedee. It's good against Armarouge. If you just have the speed control, it's good against Pult. We're baiting them into going Masquerada through our team chart. We're baiting Masquerada, and Masquerada's good versus Dozo here. We can always pivot out the Dozo for something like Pult to block a Flower Gift. Even Indeedee can eat one. Armarouge is a great Pokemon to switch on the Flower Gift. And if you disguise Zoroark as Dozo and you want like Dozo Tatsu, you can just use the counter in that situation. Soak the Flower Gift and punish. Right? So this is a flowchart. This is a thing that we're setting up beforehand. We're practicing this. We're going through our potential win conditions against a bad matchup that we're baiting our opponent into going for from the start. So, good. Well, it's Zoroark plus Dozo is not where we put this. We'd put this one with Zoroark-Tatsu, because we have to disguise Zoroark as Dozo. Maybe I should put like Zoroark-Dozo. And this is why I said like Zoroark is a great example of like needing flowcharts to work, but it's a more advanced example because like we're actually floating for multiple mons at the same time. Good versus Masquerada. And you would definitely go in a lot more detail. It's just that this is the time and the space that I have to type this. So what are the advantages of Zoroark-Dondozo? It looks like the Tatsu is right there. So what you would do in that situation if Zoroark is disguised as Tatsu, right? If Zoroark is disguised as Tatsu, what you would do is the right play for them is to nuke the Dozo slot, because the Tatsu, you know, they probably know, like a good player would know that something's not up and that their only loss condition there is to nuke the Dozo. So that means Dozo probably should be switching because they're going to be nuking it with something that's really, really big, which means I would probably be switching out Dozo to something like Pult or Indeedee, maybe even Armarouge, or you might even just switch in the Tatsu, soak damage because Tatsu has better resistances than Dozo does, and go for just a big play with Zoroark. You can also, I don't really recommend the Dozo plus Zoroark lead because it has a lower speed control. I would highly recommend the Dozo, the Zoroark Tatsu lead. Yeah, this lead's a little bit too low power, but you can always just hard switch out the Zoroark for Tatsu and bait them into thinking like, oh, that's Zoroark, so we can use it as bait. Use as bait to bring in real Tatsu. And we're gonna do like this. There. So, you know, I'm figuring out these flowcharts. This is I've never played a game with this team either, but you know, and I will be streaming these. I will be streaming with this team. Probably, you know, you guys are watching this on Sunday. I'm recording on Saturday. You guys will be seeing these games live on stream. My first games ever with this team. probably on Twitch, probably like Sunday morning. So after you guys watch this video, I'm probably gonna be streaming. So just go check out the Twitch. There's a link in the description. But yeah, figuring out these flowcharts, like we're forcing ourselves to find win conditions. We're proactively thinking, putting ourselves in the driver's seat and realizing things that we need to slightly do. If I didn't write this stuff down, I might not know it. And so that's just how my brain works, and hopefully yours work the same. But yeah, using Zoroark as bait because it's obvious that the Zoroark, the only way your opponent would lose there is if, how do I word this? If it's Zoroark-Dondozo, like if this is the actual lead, the way that, this is 2 fast mons with speed control, right? So there are things they need to do against that, but like there's actually no threat of Dozo. So they don't have to actually bring their Dozo threats. If this, like, Haze and stuff like that, if this is the lead, they still have to respect the Dozo, right? Because they always have to respect the Dozo. But, if I pivot out my Dozo, it's obvious that this is the Zoroark for most people to try and punish it. I know I'm doing a shit job of explaining this. You guys are going to need to see these games live. But this can be a really, really good turn for making your opponent like reveal their Terra, waste their speed control, stuff like that, and getting a free pivot and avoiding damage. Because remember, when Tatsu hits the board and Dozo's on the board, Tatsu goes inside and avoids damage. So you can like go Zoroark disguises Tatsu Dozo and go for like a liquidate, do whatever you want with your Dozo. It doesn't really matter. And Zoroark can protect. And then next turn, you can actually just switch out the Zoroark for Tatsu to get a second protect. And it's really, really cool. And that's just a cool thing this team can do. You guys will see a lot more. Let's talk about Zoroark Indeedee. Zoroark Indeedee is not going to be as good. I would say Zoroark is probably best disguised as Armarouge. I would also say that, I'm talking about the value of like Zoroark disguised as Dozo with Tatsu, but Zoroark can be disguised as any of these 6 Pokemon. This team's flowcharts go crazy. I can disguise Zoroark as Pult and pair it with Tatsu and go for like, I'm making them think that we are U-turning into our Dozo where we're not U-turning and we're just punishing with 2 fast mons. There's so many, which is again, one of the reasons why I say you should be making your own flowcharts and figuring out your own ways to win. And if you ever fight something that you lose to, you can go back to this flowchart paper and say, man, is there anything I could have done? What sort of small changes could I make to my team to give myself an advantage in this situation? So Zoroark, I like disguising as Armarouge to make them think that we're Trick Room, and then we can go for like imprisons on the Hyper Voices, imprison on Trick Rooms, and we can just use Zoroark to like blow up a lot of the other mons that like, for example, other Armarouges, Zoroark can just blow those things up with Night Days. So good versus TR. Zoroark plus Armarouge. Zoroark would probably best disguise as Indeedee, but that's not going to work against good players because they'd see the Psychic Surge not activate. Zoroark, the only thing I don't really like disguising as is the Indeedee, and I've actually used teams in the past that disguise Zoroark as an Indeedee, and then the Indeedee's like actually own tempo and has like fake out, so they think when you lead Zoroark and it's Indeedee, they think like, oh, sorry, they think when you actually lead Indeedee and it doesn't set Psychic Terrain that's Zoroark, and it's not Zoroark and it fake outs you. That's another thing that I thought about doing for this team, but I just think the Psychic Terrain's more value. So I would probably be disguising Zoroark, if I were to pair it with Armarouge, as Dozo. And the advantage of this matchup is it gets your opponent to think that like, oh, they're just going Trick Room, like that's Dozo, Armarouge, I can nuke either of those, that's fine. Zoroark functions at a completely different speed tier. Also, always disguising your Zoroark as the Dozo baits in those things like Masquerada. So fake TR slash physical bait. A lot of these teams is baiting your opponent in false sense security. Zoroark-Pult's a really, really good one. I like Zoroark-Pult. I like Zoroark as Tatsu and Dozo because it baits your opponent into thinking like, okay, this Pult's going to U-turn, right? This Pult's going to U-turn, and after the Pult U-turns, they're going to bring in their actual Dozo teammate. So if I disguise Zoroark as Tatsu, they're going to U-turn the Pult and bring in Dozo, and that's the combo. Or if I lead Dozo, Zoroark disguises Dozo, they're going to U-turn the Pult, bring in the Tatsu, right? That's what they think. And in reality, it's just 2 Pokemon. They're going to be slamming in fast Night Dazes, and like, I could U-turn if I want, but it's most likely going to be like Dragon Darts, or they're like really, really big moves, and we're just going to go and just roll them on the first turn. So like, big turn 1 damage. So again, this is very, like you'd probably need to do 30 or 40 of these different lead combinations to talk about like all the good and bad things, and we haven't even talked about the bad things, right? And the bad things are things you can find by playing games with your team, right? You play a bunch of games, you're like, oh, this is shit versus this. Like you would find like, wow, Zoroark disguised as Dozo plus Tatsu, like, yeah, it's good versus Masquerade, but it's an auto loss to something like, Murkrow Goldango or something like that. Just throw that out there. And so you would start to think like, okay, so let's find what's actually bad for Smirko-Goldango. This one. No, it's still good for Smirko-Goldango because you just soak the damage. I mean, you'd lose your Pult, but you'd just be... Well, all right, let's talk about this. Zoroark disguised as Tatsudozo plus Pult. This baits Smirko-Goldango. It baits it, and what I mean by bait is they see that board and they're like, okay, I can do whatever I want with the Murkrow. There's probably going to Tailwind just because that's what they do because they see the Pult, and they're going to go make it rain. So the Pult's probably going to get KO'd. So what we need to do is turn 1, switch to Armarouge. Right, you switch to Armarouge, you hard switch out the Pult to Armarouge, right? And in doing so, you're going to be walling to make it rain, and it's going to activate our Citrus Berry after our EV spread, which we'll talk about in just a minute. And you just one-shot the Goldango with a Night Daze, right? And we're Sash, so we're soaking the damage. Also, we're still going to have the Zoroark and the Armarouge on the board for a turn. They're probably losing that mon. They're going to come in with something like an Earthquake from a Garchomp. Look at us, it's flow charting. And then that's where we just go wide guard and start pot-shotting the rest of the mons. And if that Garchomp's Scarf, they basically just lose the game there. So that's an idea. It baits them into that, and we talk about what we want to do for turns 2, turns 3, turns 4. Do they have to bring a Garchomp? No. But, like, is there a Garchomp in that team? Definitely yes. You know, that's basically it. And they could use different moves. They could punish different ways. But, like, you gotta remember, we only revealed, like, we only used 2 of our mons. We still have a Pult in the back that pins their Garchomp, and once we wait out their speed control. And then our last mon would probably be, like, the Scarf Tatsu to still, again, take out that Garchomp if we need. So we already are planning ways that we can be aggressive, ways that we can be defensive, and ways that we can get ourselves out of situations that we're putting ourselves in on purpose to win in Pacific matchups. So that's kind of how flow charting works. And this stuff gets easier the more that you do it. This is a learned skill. Like, you may be thinking this is so much information at once, but every team that is worth its salt, like, does this. Every one of my teams that used to, like, I have no idea how you come up with these combos. I would have to force myself to find the good in things that are bad. I have to find myself to cover up for the bad in things that I think are good, right? And so I really, really think this stuff's super, super important. And if you guys have any questions about flow charting, please let me know in the comments. This is just something that takes a really long time to learn, and it's slight advantage. Like, if you can think of one positive thing for every single combination, like right now, we went over all the things that, like, Zoroark pairs with, but you want to actually do this for every one of your Pokemon. This should be taking you hours for every single team if you're doing it correctly. We talked about the advantages of every single thing that Zoroark does with all of its teammates. The next thing we do, you already covered Zoroark, right? What does everything that Dozo does with Tatsu, everything Dozo does with Indeedee, everything Dozo does with Armarouge, everything that Dozo does with Pult? What's the next one? What does everything Tatsu does with Indeedee? What does everything Tatsu does with Armarouge? Everything Tatsu does with Pult. Do you see where I'm going? What does everything Indeedee does with Armarouge? And what does everything that Indeedee does with Pult? And last but not least, what does Armarouge do with Pult? You know, you don't really need to go back over what Armarouge does with Tatsu. You already covered that in the Tatsu section. So every single Pokemon you go down the list with, it becomes a smaller list, but you learn every possible good and bad thing about every single matchup. And in forcing yourself to find good things about every matchup, which some of these matchups are bad, you're going to find your weaknesses that you didn't know you had. For example, Tatsu Indeedee is not great. I mean, but I can find some good things. Like, I have Scarf Tatsu with Hydro Pump. So the good things that's good against are things that use, like, for example, that's great against Arcanine. I can just go, follow me, Hydro Pump the Arcanine. Now Arcanine's gone. There's nothing to intimidate the, or Wisp or do anything with to the Dozo. I'm in a good spot. Same thing against, like, other Armarouge leads. I can just pot shot out their Armarouge and I'm good to go. Indeedee might get KO'd, but that opens up a spot for my Dozo. So do you see, like, thinking of that stuff, forcing myself to find situations, I was able to find the small situations where I could turn a losing bad lead into a good one and spin it more towards my direction. Another bad one is probably, like, Pult Armarouge, just because, like, there's no protects on that board and it's very susceptible to speed control. But what it can do is, like, I can just U-turn out the Pult if they didn't lead with their speed control for Indeedee, set the terrain so I can go for, like, a turn 1 humongous expanding force in a situation where I might have to. Indeedee and Pult, yes, they do share dark weaknesses, but Indeedee's normal typing walls the Dragapult's ghost weakness. So I can actually bait ghost attacks on the Pult slot, switching that Indeedee and use Armarouge to be a bully in those situations. So force yourself to write down literally everything. Everything. Find the good and the bad. And again, this should take you about it usually takes me weeks to find all the good and bad things about every single matchup. And like I was talking about, it's just like riding a bike. The more that you do this, the more that you realize you're going to put things together like, oh, this is just like that last team I did this with. This is just like the last team I did this with. And it's going to get easier and easier as time goes on. So let's just finish up the EVs for this team. It's going to be pretty easy doing EVs, I would say. I think EVs and Terra types are like the last thing that you do when you team build. And you can understand what some of your EVs are. You know, we went into this Tatsu and realized how much speed we needed when we were building our flowcharts. But this is pretty easy. Like, there's nothing wrong when you're building teams to just go 2v2 spreads. You definitely want to go the last 4 points in HP, so you do more damage with counter. But, like, I think there's nothing wrong with 2v2 clubbing it up at the start of a team so you can understand what its strengths and weaknesses are. And this is where, like, if you're 252ing it up on a lot of these mons, you can realize, like, man, I'm wasting a little bit too much on speed. I'm wasting a little bit too much on attack, defense, special defense, whatever. And then you can use your flowcharts to, like, tweak those things. Can you, like, if you force yourself in a situation where you're trying to, like, okay, I really want to use, like, Indeedee Tatsu or Indeedee Dondozo, but like I keep getting O-code on my Indeedee with like a Scarlet or something, you could just EV train the Indeedee at the end to cover up for that bad matchup that you didn't see a way out of before. So use your EVs and your items and your Terra to put the last little finishing touches on your teams to help cover up for the weaknesses that you might find while flowcharting. But on your Sash Bunch, you definitely always go 2v2. Dozo's a little bit different. I like putting 12 Dozo just so we can outspeed other Dozos. It's also just a good mon. Like, I can just go like redirection, TR, Dozo, Pulp for after the TR's gone. Great core. We don't even need the Tatsu here. Dozo just a good mon. I really like Dozos that look like this. I like 252 Dozos here, and the reason we have this much instead of putting points in HP is Dozo gets huge diminishing returns off HP. I don't think you need that much. I'd probably put about like 156 and then probably like 84. It gets such big diminishing returns on HP and last 4 like right here. So you're not wasting your points here. And then I'm going to put my points right here. I think a lot of people like to go more aggressive with their Dozos, but like this definitely works for me. I feel like you need some defense to make this set work. You need a lot of special defense to make this set work. And through the use of like Sleep Talk, we can basically wall anything with this set. And yeah, we're not like super strong, but if we change our ability to Oblivious, we're immune to Intimidate. So they can't Intimidate cycle us. So it's a pretty good set, I would say. As for Tatsu, we already know that we need 220 there. We're just going to 252, and then what we're going to do is we're going to split this up into a 28-4-4. EV training's like not like I've already done all the math for all this stuff, so it makes it look a lot easier for me. But basically, we know that we need that much speed to outspeed Pulp. We know that we want a 252 so we can hit as hard as possible in special attack. And then normally you just have 36 left over, and you should be putting those in speed, but you can always cut up the last 8 and put that into a 4-4 in each respective defensive slot. And that's going to be better in the long term, just because 1 point in each respective defense slot is worth more than 1 to HP. You know, 2 points are better than 1, works exactly the same here. Indeedee is going to be a little bit different. I think that if I was using the Psychic Surge set, I'd be using something like a 2v2 HP, and then I'd be going like a 156, maybe like a 164, something, a 172, with the rest in defense and just a little bit in speed. That's how I would be doing it. But I think because we're using a Rocky Helmet, I'm just going to do this. But I'm actually going to put 12 there. And the reason I'm putting 12 in my speed stats is so I'm not losing to mirrors. 85 is a pretty popular speed stat. Dozo is just a pretty popular mon. I don't want to lose the speed tiers by people that just throw the last 4 there. I want to put 12 there to speed creep those things. So just 244 here. Now, this does make us a little bit weaker on the special side. Like, if they lead, like, Hydreigon and something that's slower than the Hydreigon, like, Hydreigon can just one-shot us, and then we get one-shotted by the guy's partner. But this makes us a lot better at using our Rocky Helmet, and this might give us the advantage in something like a mouse hold matchup. So we're just going to try this. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, I can change it. Armarouge is going to be pretty simple. I like a 252 set. I'm a big fan of it. Again, we put the 12 in here, so we're outspeeding other Armarouges. And then from there, it's like 236 and a 4-4. Not 5. So it's very similar to the thing we did with the Tatsu, and this is just how I like to run it. Some people like to go speed reduced on Armarouge because they like to play it in Trick Room, but I don't really want to trick unless I have to. I like being a bully if possible, and there's no real speed tier. I don't want to put a ton of points in speed. I don't have Tailwind. There's nothing that we can double. Yes, we have Icy Wind calcs to keep in mind, but like I don't want to put enough points in speed to make ourselves worse in TR and capitalize on Icy Wind because I think Tatsu Armarouge is not that great of a lead. Pult, very simple. A lot of people would just click the button and go 2v2 speed Pult, but I don't think Pult's popular enough, even though it should be. Like, as the meta develops, by January, if you're running Pult and you're not running it like full speed with like its respective speed boosting nature, you're probably doing it wrong. But right now, we don't actually need to because no one's running Pult. So you just need to outspeed one Pokemon. A Pokemon that's come up a lot in our team builders so far, and that's Masquerada. And you can find out all these things you need to outspeed and outdeal with by going to your usage stats. It's so important. Like, I've already memorized this stuff. This is easy peasy lemon squeezy street for me. But, you know, memorize those usage stats. It's pretty important. Meowscarada, if it's a jolly nature, is, remember, always set things to level 50. EVs are set differently. So 192. So we need to outspeed this number with Dragapult. So Dragapult's going to go over here. And you can see, if we go to a blank set it to 50. If I were to just give my Pult 252 in speed, it outspeeds it. So that means normally you do want to put your nature in your highest stat because you get a 10% boost to whatever stat. So normally you'd be like, all right, well, I need to outspeed 192. So I need to get to 193. So you would say, well, I could just go like this and then drop these points down all the way, right? And put the rest in bulk. And like, there's nothing wrong with a set for your Pult that looks like this, right? I think that's right. I think that's not wasting points. Yeah. So there's nothing wrong with this Pult set at all. Like, if you want to use this Pult set and you want to be bulky as all hell, this is the Pult set. This is going to throw your opponent's calcs out by about 5 to 6% because you're way bulkier than you should be. I personally am going to do something a little bit different. It's also a lot easier to do it this way because this is utilizing your nature, giving you a 10% boost to this stat, which is your highest stat here. So we're basically making our speed carry a bunch of our EV training burden. I'm actually going to do it like this for a couple reasons. We're going to go 252 in this. Now, not only do we get like 1 extra speed here, which is good for outspeeding things that outspeed Meowscarada by 1 point. So this is speed creeping Meowscarada and the things that check it even further. But then I'm afforded the luxury of going Adamant here, which might not sound like a lot, but on banded mons that are using potential AoE moves that need just a little bit more damage, this is going to be the deal breaker that like gives Pult the... This is going to allow Pult to just get those KOs when paired with a little bit more damage from another dive buddy, like something like that Tatsu. If I want to go Muddy Water and Dragon Darts, I'm actually going to be able to get 2 KOs in the first turn against a lot of mons because of the Adamant. I wish Tatsu could go Modest to do the same thing, but it can't. The last 4, I'm going to put them in defense as opposed to HP. Its HP stat's a lot bigger than the defense stat, and a lot of things that would check Pult. Yes, there are a lot of special attackers, but it's going to be things like dragon attacks, and I'd like to make it so, like, you know, jolly Garchomps might not be able to get the KO on me. So I'm going to put the last 4 in defense. But yeah, it's a lot easier to do an EV spread like this. It technically functions the same way. It's not as bulky, but it's a lot stronger, and it technically works. So this is an example of a situation where 2v2 just happened to work. And this is one of the few situations where you could actually make this stuff work. So that's pretty much it. I'm going to be finishing up this team in game. I want to actually show you guys. You're like, you didn't play any games with the team. How am I supposed to know how to do it if you don't do it? And it's like, well, you know, I got my Zoroark, right? I got my Zoroark, I got my Dozo, I got my Tatsu. Wrong EVs on all these things, by the way. I have my Indeedee right here. And I got my Armarouge. But then I have my Dreepy. It's not a Dragapult yet. So, and it's not the wrong nature. I had to breed it. Like, so I don't have the team yet. And you're like, but then why did I even watch this video if you didn't even know what you're doing? I've used this sort of core like a bunch of times before over the years. I've done a ton of videos with Zoroark. You can check them out. Just type in THATSAplusONE Zoroark in YouTube search. A bunch of things will come up. This team's going to be great, and it's going to be a lot of fun to play with. And by the time you guys finish this video on Sunday, it's probably going to be, I'm going to be streaming games with it. And if you're watching this on a day that's not the day the video goes live, well, then the video of me playing this team will probably also be on YouTube somewhere. So that's pretty much it. If you guys want more team building guides like this, think about leaving a comment, think about leaving a like, help this video get to 100 likes, and let me know if you learned anything and what that specific thing was. And other than that, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Peace out. I'll see you guys next time.